So Trump won. Let's talk about it. Things fall apart very slowly. And then, faster and faster, all of a sudden. There is no one big thing that has happened or is going to happen that is going to tip us into suddenly we're in the cool zone, the revolutionary moment has begun. But Trump coming back into office is a bigger thing. On top of that, America is the political and socioeconomic hegemon, and changes that happen, major changes like this, are going to affect people all around the world, and especially in countries as closely allied to America as the UK is. So, we'll talk about some of that too. The purpose of this video is primarily to say to people, it's okay to feel feelings of despair, fear, but panic is not serving you. You need to move through those feelings, and then you need to find answers violates the interests of the imperial ruling class. Calling for a ceasefire in Gaza, for example, an uncomplicatedly popular move for the American public, where genocide has been recognized by international bodies, this was off the table. Because for the Democrats to do that, when the Democrats' base is progressive liberals, would mean recognizing that Israel and Israel supporters in the US were on the wrong side of history. That it was the morally wrong position to take. Republicans can do it just fine, because it's them being tough on foreign affairs. If the Democrats did it, it would damage America's hold over oil in the Middle East and over global shipping. We all need to understand that any reactionary shift in our politics that we fear is dwarfed by the implicitly reactionary nature of imperialism. The violence that imperialism does is the same whether it's happening to minorities in the imperial core or whole populations in the imperial periphery. Bringing back the imperialist status quo will not end that. I think sometimes I'm a pretty good writer. Like, sometimes I look at my notebook and I'm like, actually I can write with shit. The American Empire is a big, unwieldy thing without mind, memory, or center, and it isn't capable of recognizing that it would be better for it, that is to say better for the people living in it, better for its long-term survival, to cede ground there in that way. That's just not how it, the organism of American imperialism, works. I'm deeply unmoved by talk that frames this as a problem of getting through the next little while and then getting the Democrats back in. The Democrats aren't going to improve the situation if they're re-elected, because every election from here until the end of the current political order is going to be the fascist versus technically not the fascist. Because it's a performance, and it sounds incredibly cynical and also like very shallow analysis to say something like elections are just a performance, but they really, really are. They're a performance with incredibly high stakes, and they keep everyone invested in the idea that there's a democratic process going on and they have a say in stuff. Can I have the argan oil, please? They keep people, broadly invested in the idea that they have a say, or at least invested in the idea that if they don't use their say, then the bad man will come back. So that if they then use their say, they see that, they've elected the good woman, and so not having the bad man was a big collective effort we all put together, and now we saved the day.
And now what?
And now what, right? That's exactly it. Like, that's what I guess, this is where, it's not just Palestine, and it's not just reproductive rights, and it's not just workers' rights, and healthcare, and immigrants, and everything else you could say that it is. It is all of those things, but it's also just like that sense of now what, that everyone had about the US elections, the impression that everyone felt that, like, if we did get Kamala Harris, what then? Like, on top of that, there's climate change to consider. How many American elections do you even think are left? No. This isn't about getting through a tricky few years. This is about getting out the other side of this nightmare and into a world worth living in. I simultaneously do and don't want to spend time here convincing people that what the American situation is driving towards is revolution. I do because, it's nice to be on the same page, right? And I don't because, come on? How are you not getting this by now? I also don't because, thinking massively big picture is not that helpful to people right now, in the same way that panicking isn't that helpful. What's helpful right now is organizing. Okay, all of that was preamble before we get to the immediate specifics of Trump coming back into power and what that's going to mean. And I think that's good because it's important to not just have this conversation like it's about Orange Man bad, like it's just about Trump. We have to understand a broader context here. The context of all that lives in the coconut tree and everything else, or whatever it was Kamala Harris said.
Everything is in context. My mother she would give us a hard time sometimes, and she would say to us, I don't know what's wrong with you young people. You think you just fell out of a coconut tree? You exist in the context of all in which you live and what came before you.
Now we should talk about Trump and his project. It is worthwhile being scared, because these are horrible, shitty people with bad intentions. We know what their plans are, and their plans suck. Things are going to suck for immigrants. Things in cases where passers-by just intervened and just said, fuck off, don't do that. They didn't, because they couldn't. And that remains true today, albeit in a less totalitarian fascistic case, but like we've seen with immigration raids, when communities come together to just tell like immigration forces, no, you're not kidnapping our neighbor and deporting them, they don't, because they can't, because we outnumber them. That's how this works. We outnumber them. That's the thing this always comes back down to over and over and over again. It's important in all of this to understand the authoritarian mindset. These are fascist bully boys. They're just testing the limits of what they can get away with, and the more resistance they're met with, the quicker they'll give up. Like, this is just... Observably, all these people think like teenage boys, and they just want to find out what is possible, what is the absolute maximum amount of getting away with shit they can do. Like when Trump's people talk about invading Greenland and Canada.
So we don't need their milk? We got a lot of milk.
That's an obvious distraction, right? We all went through one Trump term already. We know how we're just fire hosed with nonsense, bullshit, gibberish all the time, and it's exhausting. But also, it gauges the general mood and support for more American imperialism. Like, people might be looking at Trump talking about invading Greenland and saying, that's obviously silly, but yeah, we should make America great again. A strong America is good. They're just testing the limits of the possible. So we need to know the difference between distractions when we see them and the things Trump's state is actually trying to get away with, and when we see them trying to actually get away with something. At there, it's important to resist every time, because there it will set the limits of the possible for them, and they will know that people don't fucking want them to do that and are gonna stop them. Trump has built spectacular fascism, right? All of bourgeois politics exists in the world of the spectacle, and Trump has built this like bizarre mishmash monstrosity of an ally between far-right influencers, the Silicon Valley tech bro elite ruling class, and some old money people who are on his side, like hyper-conservative, oil billionaire people, fundamentalist Christians. And it doesn't actually have broad-based support. This means that
All right, so buckle up for this deep dive, because we're going deep into some anxieties I think a lot of people are feeling right now.
Oh, yeah.
About, the potential for, another right-wing figure like Trump coming into power.
Mm.
And to help us unpack all this, we're turning to, this is a great source, a YouTube video called What Now? By Sophie from Mars.
Oh, yeah. She's a
trans activist.
Yeah, she does not hold back.
Yeah, she's pretty fiery.
She gets right to it.
Yeah.
And she starts off by arguing that, like, American politics, it's not just this internal thing, it's all tied up with, like, global power dynamics, and it affects everybody.
Yeah, and she brings up this really interesting sample about Palestine to illustrate that apparently 77% of U.S. voters supported a ceasefire in Gaza.
Wow.
But neither political party, actually did anything about it.
So what's going on there?
Right. How does that even make sense?
It really shows, how these, traditional political systems, even when they seem to, reflect what people want,
right,
they're still, constrained by these deeper power structures.
It makes you wonder how much power we actually have.
Exactly. Yeah.
And that kind of leads into her critique of both Democrats and Republicans.
Mm-hmm.
She's arguing that they're both beholden to these powerful interests, right? Whether it's corporations or lobbyists, the wealthy elite.
Right.
And so, is it just naive to hope for a good candidate to fix everything?
Maybe. Sophie seems to think so.
Yeah.
And this is where I think it gets really interesting.
Yeah.
She brings up this concept of, have you heard of this spectacular fascism?
I had to look it up.
Yeah, it's
not something I was familiar with.
It's kind of a new term for me.
Yeah.
It's basically this idea that political figures, and she's really talking about Trump here,
right,
they use performance and spectacle, all this rhetoric, to gain support, even if their actual policies are really harmful.
So think about it.
Yeah.
Think about those massive rallies, all the media attention.
Constant.
Yeah, that inflammatory language.
Exactly.
It's all about creating the spectacle.
Yeah.
That kind of bypasses rational thought and just goes straight for the emotions.
And it makes you think, how easily can we be manipulated by that?
Totally.
By this, carefully crafted image.
Right, even if it doesn't match up with reality.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And she goes even further. She says, Trump's goal, it wasn't necessarily about setting up this full-blown totalitarian state.
Right.
But it was something maybe even more insidious.
Oh, yeah.
Empowering a wealthy elite while the system just crumbles around everyone else.
That's a scary thought.
Right.
Yeah.
It's pretty chilling.
It's a different way of thinking about how power works,
Yeah.
It's not always this in-your-face control.
Right.
It's about subtly shaping the rules to benefit a few While most people are struggling.
Right. So far, things are looking pretty bleak.
Yeah, it's not looking good.
But then Sophie, shifts gears.
Okay.
And she starts talking about solutions.
Oh, good.
Practical stuff, right?
Yeah.
And she really emphasizes community organizing, direct action.
Right.
As a way to push back against all this.
That makes sense.
And she specifically mentions things like supporting harm reduction centers.
Yeah.
Tenants unions.
Right.
It seems like she's really focused on those grassroots efforts to address these immediate needs.
So it's like a two-pronged approach.
Yeah.
Understanding the big picture, but also taking action in your own backyard.
Absolutely, yeah.
Even if it seems small.
Yeah, and she has a point. If you look at the example of DIY hormone replacement therapy
Right.
within the trans community.
Yeah.
That's a response to a system that's failing them.
Exactly.
But it's a way of taking control and saying, we're not going to wait around for permission. We're going to take care of ourselves.
Right. And that can be incredibly empowering.
Totally.
Especially for groups who have been denied access to resources.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's about creating your own solutions when the system fails you.
Yeah, it makes you think, though.
Yeah.
Should essential health care be a DIY thing?
That's a good question.
It's amazing that communities are supporting each other.
Right.
But it also shows you how broken the system is.
It speaks to that,
Yeah.
that it necessitates this kind of thing.
It's like
workarounds.
Yeah, workarounds.
Yeah.
Exactly. And it goes back to what she was saying about building these alternatives.
Right.
Not just to survive,
Yeah.
but to challenge the status quo.
Exactly. It's like every time a community creates their own solution, it's a little act of resistance.
Yeah.
Chipping away at that power.
Right. I love that.
Yeah.
It reminds me of that quote by Margaret Mead. Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has.
Absolutely. And she really embodies that.
Yeah.
She's not just analyzing, she's offering solutions.
Right.
Yeah.
She's getting people fired up.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that leads us to another interesting thing she talks about, this emphasis on secure communication.
Oh, yeah.
Throughout the video, she's hammering on this point about ditching platforms like Facebook and WhatsApp. Using more secure things like Signal and Matrix.
Right.
And I got to say, I struggle with this a little bit.
Yeah.
Is it really necessary to go that far?
Well, I think it depends on, your own assessment. For some people, especially if they're activists or from marginalized communities, it might be crucial. For others, it might feel like overkill.
Right.
But her point is, we should be aware of the risks and make choices about the tools we use.
Yeah.
And she brings up this really fascinating point about how the tools we use actually shape the way we think.
Oh, interesting.
And the way we interact with the world.
Yeah.
If we're constantly being watched and tracked, it creates this atmosphere of self-censorship, paranoia.
Right.
Which ultimately benefits those in power.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not just about the data they're collecting. It's about how it makes us behave.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We're less likely to speak out.
Yeah.
Less likely to challenge things.
And even think critically.
Right.
Yeah.
And she even suggests using Matrix servers for things like watching movies with friends.
Wow.
Playing video games.
Okay.
It's like she's envisioning this whole other digital world that operates outside of corporate and government control.
It's like building a parallel world.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
There's pretty radical.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, but, all this talk about building alternatives and secure communication,
Yeah.
it can feel overwhelming, especially if you're just trying to, get by, right?
Survive.
Yeah.
Survive.
I think she recognizes that.
Yeah. Yeah.
She doesn't expect everyone to become a tech expert or a community organizer overnight.
Right.
But she does encourage people to find their own way.
Yeah.
Yeah. What are you passionate about? How can you contribute?
Yeah. And she uses herself as an example, right? Talking about her work with the Harm Reduction Hub.
Yeah.
The tenants union.
Right.
These are things she really cares about.
Right.
And she found ways to get involved.
Exactly. It's a good reminder that activism doesn't have to be this huge thing.
Yeah.
It can be about finding ways to make a difference in your own community.
Yeah.
In your own little world.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's also, I think, good for you.
Yeah.
Finding that niche.
Yeah.
It makes you more resilient.
Yeah. It connects you with people who think the same way, working together.
Right.
It's powerful.
Especially when everything feels like it's fallen apart.
Exactly. It's about finding that solidarity, that purpose.
Yeah.
knowing you're not alone.
Absolutely.
She even mentions the Tenants Union Federation as a resource
Oh, nice.
if you want to get involved
Yeah.
with housing stuff.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
It's a good reminder that there are already
Yeah.
organizations out there doing great work.
There are.
We don't have to start from scratch.
Yeah.
We can plug in.
Learn from others.
Yeah.
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 Contribute.
And speaking of existing networks,
Mm-hmm.
Sophie spends a lot of time talking about the global implications of American politics.
Oh, right.
She argues that, what happens in America,
Yeah.
it doesn't stay in America.
Right.
Right.
It's like the butterfly effect.
Yeah,
Yes.
exactly.
Wow.
Yeah, like a butterfly flaps its wings in Brazil.
Right.
And there's a hurricane in Texas.
Exactly.
It's like that.
Yeah.
And Sophie seems to think that America's political climate has this ripple effect,
Mm-hmm.
influencing trends and movements all over the world.
And she brings up the far right in Europe
Yeah.
as an example.
Yeah, these parties, like
Yeah.
UK's Reform Party,
Mm-hmm.
Germany's AFD,
Right.
they're gaining traction.
And what's even more concerning is that they're often supported by American billionaires.
Wait, really?
Yeah, like Elon Musk.
American billionaires are funding far-right movements in Europe.
Mm.
Why would they do that?
That is the question.
Yeah.
What's their end game?
Right. It's wild.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
She argues that it's about weakening those progressive forces in Europe and making it easier for a small elite to take control.
Right. So it's all about consolidating their own power.
Exactly. It's like they see these far-right movements as a way to destabilize things and then swoop in,
Oh, wow. That's pretty cynical.
It is.
But I guess it wouldn't be the first time
No,
that the wealthy have manipulated things to their advantage.
definitely not.
But what does this mean for those of us outside the U.S.?
Right.
Like, is there anything we can do?
Yeah, I think she thinks there is.
Okay.
She says we need to be paying attention
Mm-hmm.
because those same trends,
Yeah.
they're going to show up everywhere.
Right.
It's a call for global solidarity,
Mm-hmm.
awareness,
Yeah.
this fight against fascism.
Mm-hmm.
It's not limited by borders.
So it's about building connections, sharing information, supporting each other's struggles.
Exactly. No matter where you live,
Mm-hmm.
we're all in this together.
And the solutions are the same everywhere.
Yeah, building communities, creating alternatives,
Yeah.
mutual aid,
Yeah.
resisting those who want to divide us.
It's a powerful message.
It is.
We're all connected.
Yeah.
But I am curious, how does she address the specific challenges that trans people are facing?
That's what we'll get into in the next part.
Okay.
Yeah.
This is getting pretty intense.
It is?
But in a good way.
Yeah.
It's really making me think.
Good.
Yeah. About my role in all this.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. So we're back and ready to dig into the second half of Sophie from Mars's What Now video.
All right.
I gotta say, I'm finding her mix of like bleak realism and these calls to action
Mm-hmm.
really compelling.
Yeah, it's a good balance.
Yeah, it is.
It's not just doom and gloom. It's like,
Yeah.
okay, things are bad, but here's what we can do.
Exactly. And where do we even begin to put some of these ideas into practice?
Well, she spends a good chunk of the video talking about this idea of building alternative systems, not just as a way to like survive,
Right.
but as a form of active resistance.
Okay.
You remember that example of
Yeah.
DIY hormone replacement therapy in the trans community?
Yeah, absolutely.
Like that's
She also talked about harm reduction centers,
right.
tenants unions, all these instances of people coming together
Mm-hmm.
to address these needs that their governments are like ignoring or even actively making worse.
Right. It's like filling in the gaps
Right.
where the system is failing.
But is that sustainable long term?
That's the big question, isn't it? Like
Yeah.
it's inspiring to see these grassroots efforts.
Mm-hmm.
It shows you the power of community, mutual aid,
yeah.
but it can feel like a Band-Aid sometimes
Right.
on a much bigger problem.
Right. And Sophie acknowledges that.
Yeah.
She points out that even acts of compassion, like feeding homeless people or providing aid during natural disasters,
Yeah.
those have been criminalized by the state in some cases,
It's true. It's like
which is crazy to think about.
any form of independent organization is seen as a threat
Yeah.
by these systems of power.
It makes you wonder if it's intentional,
Mm-hmm.
Like the system is designed to keep people reliant on it.
Right. Even when it's failing them.
Yeah, even when it's not working.
Yeah.
So how do we navigate that?
Right.
Like Sophie seems to think secure communication is key.
Mm-hmm.
She keeps hammering on that point
She does, yeah.
about ditching platforms like Facebook and WhatsApp,
Yeah.
using more secure options, Signal, Matrix.
Yeah.
And honestly, I struggle with this.
Yeah, I get it.
Like, is it really necessary to go that far?
I think it depends on your own risk assessment.
Okay.
You know, for some people, it might be essential, especially if they're activists or from marginalized communities.
Right.
But for others, it might feel like overkill.
Yeah.
But her point is we should at least be aware of the risks,
Right.
you know, and make informed choices.
Yeah. And she makes this interesting argument about how the tools we use actually shape how we think
Oh, yeah.
and how we interact with the world.
That's a good point.
Like if we're constantly being monitored and tracked,
Right.
it creates this atmosphere of self-censorship and paranoia, which ultimately benefits those in power.
It makes you less likely to speak out, less likely to challenge things.
Yeah, and she even suggests using Matrix servers for things like watching movies with friends, playing video games.
Okay, so like creating a whole separate...
Yeah, it's like a parallel digital world
Yeah, that's interesting.
that operates outside of corporate and government control.
It makes you realize we don't have to just accept the digital world as it is. We can create our own spaces, our own platforms.
I like that.
You know?
But all this talk about building alternative systems, secure communication,
Yeah.
it can feel overwhelming,
It can.
especially when you're just trying to get through the day, right?
Right, and I think she gets that.
Mm-hmm.
She doesn't expect everyone to become a tech expert or a community organizer overnight,
Right.
but she encourages people to find their own niche.
Yeah.
You know, what are you passionate about? How can you contribute?
Yeah, and she uses herself as an example,
Right?
talking about her work with the Harm Reduction Hub, the tenants union.
Yeah.
Like, these are issues that she cares about deeply.
Right, and she found a way to put her energy into those things.
Exactly.
It's a reminder that activism doesn't have to be this huge thing.
Yeah.
It can be about making a difference in your own community, in your own little world.
Absolutely.
And she argues that finding your niche, it not only helps the cause,
Yeah.
but it makes you more resilient
Okay.
because it connects you with a community
Interesting.
of like-minded people.
Right, so you're not alone.
Exactly, you're working together toward a shared goal.
And that can be really powerful.
It can, especially when the world feels like it's falling apart around you.
Absolutely, yeah.
It's about finding that solidarity, that sense of purpose,
Yeah.
knowing you're not in this fight alone.
That's a great point.
And she even mentions the Tenants Union Federation as a resource.
Oh, cool.
If you're interested in getting involved with housing activism.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so it's a good reminder that there are organizations out there
Right.
doing incredible work.
Already doing the work.
Yeah, you don't have to reinvent the wheel.
Right. You can plug into these existing networks,
Exactly.
learn from them.
Yeah, and contribute your own skills and energy.
And speaking of existing networks, Sophie spends a good chunk of time talking about the global implications of American politics.
Right.
She argues that what happens in America, it doesn't stay in America.
Right. It has ripple effects.
It's like that butterfly effect analogy, right?
Exactly,
Like
yeah.
a butterfly flaps its wings in Brazil.
Right.
There's a hurricane in Texas.
And she seems to think that America's political climate has a similar impact.
Yeah.
You know, it influences trends and movements all over the world. Yeah.
And she points to the rise of far-right movements in Europe as a prime example.
Yeah, like those parties. UK's Reform Party.
Right. Germany's AfD.
Yeah, they're gaining traction.
And what's even more disturbing, she points out that they're often directly supported by American billionaires.
Yeah, like Elon Musk.
Wait, really? American billionaires are funding far-right movements in Europe.
Yeah, it's pretty wild.
Why would they do that?
That's a good question.
Yeah. What's in it for them?
Right.
It's crazy.
She argues that it's about weakening progressive forces in Europe and making it easier for a small elite to consolidate power.
So it's all about consolidating their own power, ultimately.
Yeah, it's like they see these far-right movements as a way to destabilize things.
Right.
Create chaos.
Wow.
And then swoop in and take advantage of the situation.
That's pretty cynical.
It is, but it wouldn't be the first time.
No, definitely not.
You know, the wealthy have manipulated systems to their advantage.
Right, but what does this mean for those of us outside the U.S.?
Right.
Like, is there anything we can do?
She seems to think so.
Okay.
She says we need to be paying attention to what's happening here because those same trends are likely to show up everywhere.
Right, so it's not just an American problem.
Exactly. It's a global issue.
It's a call for global solidarity then.
It is, yeah.
You know, recognizing that the fight against fascism and authoritarianism, it's not confined to national borders.
Exactly.
So it's about building connections, sharing information, supporting each other's struggles.
Exactly. No matter where we live, we're all in this together.
And the solutions are the same everywhere.
Yeah, like building strong communities, creating alternative systems,
Yeah.
practicing mutual aid,
Okay.
resisting those who seek to divide and oppress us.
It's a powerful message.
Yes.
You know, we're all connected in this fight.
We are.
I'm curious, how does she address the specific challenges faced by trans people in all of this?
That's what we'll explore in the final part of this deep dive.
Okay, I'm ready for part 3.
All right, let's do it.
Okay, so we're back for the final part of our deep dive into Sophie from Mars's What Now video. And, we've covered a lot of
We have.
global power dynamics, community organizing, secure communication.
It's a lot
It's a lot.
to process.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I'm particularly interested to hear what she has to say about, the trans experience in this current political climate.
It's definitely a topic she approaches with a lot of vulnerability, but also fierce determination. She doesn't shy away from the challenges.
Yeah.
She talks about the fear, the despair,
Yeah.
even the suicidal thoughts that a lot of trans people are dealing with.
Yeah, and it's really heartbreaking to hear her talk about trans people she knows
Yeah.
who have, died by suicide
Mm-hmm.
because of the hate and the hostility they faced.
It's a stark reminder
It is.
of the very real consequences
Yeah.
of this kind of rhetoric.
And it's that rawness that makes her message so powerful.
Yeah,
It's not theoretical. It's coming from a place of lived experience.
exactly. She's speaking from the heart. Yeah. And while she acknowledges the pain, she refuses to let it define her.
Right.
She turns that despair into a call to action, urging trans people and their allies to fight back.
Yeah, I was really struck by how she talks about living as resistance.
Oh, yeah, that's a powerful concept.
It is. It's like she's saying the very act of being trans, of living authentically,
Yeah,
is a radical act in a society that wants to deny their existence.
exactly. It's about refusing to be silenced, refusing to be ashamed, refusing to let others dictate who they are.
Yeah, and she emphasizes the importance of finding joy, celebrating their identities.
Yes, even in the face of adversity.
Yeah, exactly.
Finding those moments of happiness.
Right, and she talks about building those strong support networks within the trans community.
Yes, sharing resources, protecting each other
Absolutely.
from violence, both systemic and physical.
It makes sense when you're constantly under attack. That sense of community becomes even more crucial.
Exactly. It's about creating those spaces of safety where trans people can be themselves
Yeah.
without fear.
And that's where allies come in too, right?
Absolutely.
She stresses that it's not enough to just passively support trans people.
Right. True allyship is about taking action.
Yeah, it's about putting yourself on the line, speaking out against transphobia.
Challenging those who perpetuate hate.
Absolutely.
And she reminds us that solidarity is more than just words. It's about showing up for trans people in concrete ways.
Right, supporting trans-led organizations, advocating for trans-inclusive policies, creating a world where trans people can thrive.
Exactly.
One of the things she says that really stuck with me is you living and your happiness and your life and your joy is everything that transgers want to destroy. Hold on to it.
It's powerful.
It is.
It's a reminder that their existence is a form of resistance.
Yeah, and a beautiful message of defiance. Hope.
Absolutely. Even in the darkest of times,
Yeah.
we can choose to embrace joy,
Yeah.
resist, live fully and authentically.
But it's not just about individual resilience, right?
Right.
It's also about collective action. She reminds us that we are the ones we've been waiting for,
Yes, we have the power to create change.
that we don't have to wait for someone else to save us.
Exactly. And that change starts with each of us finding our own role. What are you passionate about?
Yeah.
Find organizations that align with your values.
Yeah.
Get involved.
Right. Because even small actions can make a difference.
Absolutely. It's about contributing to that larger movement for social change.
It's like that saying, never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has.
I love that quote.
It's so true.
And Sophie really embodies that.
Yeah.
She's not just talking about these issues. She's
No.
living them, fighting for them.
And her final message, today I believe that we will win. It's so powerful.
It is.
It's a declaration of hope,
Yeah.
a refusal to give up.
And a call to action for all of us.
So this deep dive into Sophie from Mars's What Now has been a lot of things.
Yeah.
Intense, challenging, and ultimately incredibly inspiring.
I agree.
We explored some dark corners of our reality,
We did.
but we also saw those glimmers of hope,
Yes.
of resilience.
The power of collective action.
Right, the potential to create a better future.
Exactly.
So where do we go from here?
Well, Sophie has given us a lot to think about, a lot to grapple with, and most importantly, a lot to do.
Mm-hmm.
The future is not predetermined.
Right.
It's something we create together.
Yeah.
One act of resistance, one act of creation, one act of love at a time.
That's where we'll leave you today.
Take care, everyone.
Take Sophie's message to heart, find your own way to make a difference, and never give up hope.